You're listening to Infertility Bites, a catharsis podcast. Infertility bites, but it bites a bit less when you're not alone. My name is Casey, and I'm blessed to be joined by my co-captain in this journey, my wife Sarah.
Hello.
On this series, we're going to talk about our experiences dealing with infertility, and eventually IVF, was what we had to go through. It's important to note, though, that we are not doctors or even, air quotes, experts. We're just people that understand how difficult it can be. Each person's journey is going to be unique, like a fingerprint, so it's best to leave the medicine to the professionals, but you can talk to other people who've been through it to kind of get an idea and help you through it. We wish we would have had a little bit more contact with other people when we were going through it. And fortunately, we went through it and things were good. And now if we choose to go through it again, if we find ourselves in a position where we can, we're going to have a support system to help us on the second round. On this episode, though, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the midpoint of our journey. And then we're going to share a kind of a shorter story from one of our listeners, shorter than last week's, and maybe a little less emotional. So
We'll see about that.
But it's not without its ups and downs. So where we kind of left off last time was we were talking about finally getting to a doctor in Kearney who did a little bit more with fertility and took it a little bit serious. My wife was in for her annual checkup, and her gynecologist knew that we'd been trying and kind of asked and had her do the 3-day cycle test. And the results of that came back enough that she suggested that we talk to another doctor at that same clinic who did a little bit more with fertility.
Yeah, she just started there.
Mm-hmm. Now, keep in mind, though, that she's still not a fertility expert. She's still not an infertility specialist, and not an RE or anything like that. But she did a little bit more with it. In fact, like I said on the last episode, we didn't have a doctor in the area that was a fertility specialist. There was another doctor at your gynecologist. We never talked to him, but he would do injectables for people.
Well, I just know, like, the one person I do know that went through him, he just thought Clomid was, like, the answer to everything.
Yeah, he would just put you on Clomid
and that's fine, but, I mean,
well,
if that's what you need, that's understandable.
And here's the deal. For a certain section of people dealing with infertility, Clomid would work, right? If the problem was almost exclusively in one person, Clomid can work. I've even heard of success stories with the man getting Clomid, and that helping increase their sperm count and being able to do it. But it's a shotgun at a problem that might need a scalpel, you know. And so, but he was there. He would do injectables. So if someone said, I've been having trouble conceiving, he'd be like, well, here's a bunch of Clomid and inject it, and maybe it helps you out, or maybe it doesn't. Who knows? And so we were really a little nervous about the idea of talking to him at all because,
well, and as evident, I've always told Casey, I said, if I'm gonna see a doctor, I want to see someone that has the same parts as me and can understand when I talk about. I'm not saying a male doctor is not qualified, but they have never experienced a cycle, so they don't know if I say something's odd, or textbook wise they might be like, well, that's odd, but that doesn't seem that big of an issue. But if I tell a woman who's had it her whole life, she might be a little bit more inclined to be like, I don't know about that. So, and it's just me. I've always been that way. I just think.
And I am sure there are plenty of perfectly knowledgeable and good male fertility specialists and male gynecologists out there. But I don't want to go see a female, person about my own genitals. You know what I mean? I get it. There's a comfort level there. Speaking of my own genitals, this is a really weird segue. Before we get into talking about her first visit with a more fertility specialist doctor, we're going to kind of jump back and talk about after the variety of things that they put Sarah through to the basal body temperature and the ovulation tests and just all of this stuff that they put her through and not getting any success. They of course turned their attention to me, and maybe rightly so. In reality, I'm, like I said on the last one, 8 years older than Sarah, and I didn't really get to talk about this in the last, but there is a history in my family involving difficulty to conceive. My own mother, who I know listens to this podcast. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Patty.
Before she had my oldest brother, they had a dark time in their lives for them with a miscarriage and difficulty conceiving, and this was 50 some years ago, and fertility treatments at that time were not nearly as advanced as they are now. In fact, basically non-existent. So they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what they were going to do, and eventually were looking into adoption. And she tells the story of they were pretty far along in the process with potentially adopting a child when spontaneously they found out she was pregnant. And because of their history, there was a lot of nervousness about will this baby actually come. But at the same point, they also didn't want to be adopting a baby and have a baby themselves right at the same time. They knew they weren't prepared for that. So they had to make this difficult choice to drop the adoption work to focus on having the baby. But
Which
no,
must have been hard. I mean, because if you're already that far along in the process, and then just not knowing.
And that's the deal, is knowing that you've had miscarriage before, and there's a chance that this pregnancy won't turn out the way you hope it will in the end anyways. Fortunately, my oldest brother was born, and so my mom didn't have to hate a miscarriage, have another miscarriage, and hate it and feel resentment for having to give up an adoption chance for it. So anyways, the doctors turned to me and said, well, we don't know why you're not conceiving, so we're gonna check to see if it's on you instead of on Sarah. Which, for any guys out there listening to this, I have a feeling that, at least to start off, most of our listeners are going to be female. A lot of that probably comes from the fact that females are the ones who have to deal with the majority of the infertility problem, right? Women are the ones who carry the baby. Women are the ones that society tells us, need to be mothers. And so they bear the brunt of it. But I'm hoping there's some men out there listening that I can talk to a bit really quickly. And that is, I don't care what your thoughts are on whether your wife needs to be tested or this or that. Get tested. It's simple. I said on the last episode, we have the easiest part of this job. I'll tell you about the hardest part of all of my testing and all of that stuff coming up here in a bit. But in reality, frankly, most of our testing is stuff that we probably already do. And so for me, they of course wanted a sample, and I tell this story because I think it's humorous, It's a little gross, so warning on that, but I think it's humorous. In Kearney, Nebraska, where we were going through this to start, there is only one processing lab that can do any sample processing of any sorts, right? So when my doctor said we need to do a semen analysis on you, the protocol for it is different than it is in many hospitals, many cities, I should say. The one lab and hospital that can currently do semen analysis in Kearney, Nebraska is a Catholic-owned hospital. Catholicism is very famous for its thoughts on sperm and masturbation. And this one is no different. So the loophole that they've found there, that they kind of exploit, is they effectively say, you can't come here and do the sample on our premises because that would be condoning masturbation, which we say is wrong. What you can do, however, is if you happen to produce a sample into a sterile sample cup at your own house and then bring it to us, we can analyze the sample. So the process at that time, and it still is in Kearney, is you get a sample cup to take home. You get some instructions on you have to wait until X number of days since producing a sample before, whether it's through masturbation or through actual intercourse. You have to wait for a certain number of days to make sure you're getting a viable sample. You have to do your business into this cup. I don't even know why I'm being coy about it. You have to masturbate and ejaculate into a cup. We're talking about infertility. This is not something that we should be coy about. But then you have to take this cup, seal it up, and you have to go out and get into your car, and you have to drive across town with this cup full of your own sperm, your own semen. You have to then park in a parking lot and get out and walk through the parking lot and then through the lobby of the hospital, and then down a hallway and then down an elevator and then across a hallway, then up some stairs and then into the lab area where you then say, hey, I have this sample that I need semen analysis on, and they're like, fill out this paperwork, and then it's okay. Now that you've done all this, you do have to go to admissions and actually check in so that we have a record of you being here. So then you have to go down, you have to walk back across the lobby to admissions, and then you have to sit down in front of a lady at a desk, and you have to explain, I'm here, I dropped off a semen analysis, and the lady has to put all that stuff in a thing, and then you get to go home. And that's a very awkward thing to do, because the entire time you're instructed to keep the sample warm. So you're like, if it's a cold, which some of the times when I had to do it, it was winter, so you have to keep this little plastic jar of your own semen, and you have to put it in your coat pocket, hold it up next to your body to keep it warm so that it doesn't. But yeah, and so it's awkward. But anyways, so they'd sent me to do a semen analysis, and the results came back, and according to them, they were low, but not really. Like, they were still normal, but low end of normal. So they're like, well, that's probably not why you're having. So we want to check for something else. And they said it's called a varicocele. Sometimes, apparently, for men, this happens, and it can cause low sperm count, and it can cause difficulty to conceive. Varicocele is very much like its name sounds. Varicose veins in the leg. Varicose veins are caused by veins expanding enough that the valves inside them that keep the blood flowing in one direction get flipped backwards and the blood can flow in the opposite direction. It's like that, except it's for the tubes that carry your semen from your balls to your testicles to the outside. So they wanted to check to see if I had one of those, and that maybe was causing things. So they made an appointment for me with the local testicular cancer expert, because he's the one who does this. And they wanted to do an ultrasound on my testicles. So here I have to go in to this oncologist, which is already, a little bit freaky when you don't have cancer. But so I have to go into this now. If you know me, I'm about an average guy in pretty much every respect of the word. I'm a basically average height. I'm, above average weight now, but at the time I wasn't quite so bad. And kind of an average guy. And so I get in here and I'm instructed, okay, strip from the waist down and sit here. The doctor will be in shortly. And so I do that and I strip from the waist down. And again, I am an average white man. Average white man. And the doctor shows up and knocks on the doors. Doctor here. And I'm like, okay, come on in. And in walks the largest black man I have ever seen in my life. Now, I'm not trying to play into stereotypes. I have no idea if this stereotype is true, but here's the deal. When you have the thoughts of a stereotype, suddenly I'm very, very nervous about my own appearance. But I can now say that in my life, I have had my testicles fondled by a large black man. So I guess I have that going for me. But they do the tests. They do the ultrasound on my testicles, and they spot no sign of a varicocele. So that was another test that effectively didn't get us anywhere. In the end, it's probably good that we got that test, if only to rule it out, because it did help push us farther down the road. But it's one of those things where it kind of shows how the doctors at that point were just throwing darts at a board trying to figure out what was going on, instead of just punting and taking us straight to a fertility specialist. Here's the deal. As much as I make fun of that, though, it's small potatoes compared to some of the stuff that Sarah had to go through. So, again, if there are any guys out there listening whose doctors are recommending they get tested in one way or another, it's small potatoes. Most of the time you just masturbate into a cup and then they test it and you roll on. Is it awkward? Yes, and we'll get to awkwardness more later down the road, but
It's awkward for us too.
But it's awkward, but it's not painful and it's not invasive, really. So we finally get to where Sarah gets recommended to a doctor who's got some fertility expertise.
Well, yeah, because the doctor we saw in Omaha, she was under her, like in her residency.
Yeah, in her
so
residency.
I mean, I'm not saying she doesn't have some form of infertility specializing, but she doesn't have Dr. Delaney specialty.
But so she does a few tests here and there, and she does a lot of the stuff that we'd already had to do with tracking basal body and doing fertility tests and stuff like this. And then she decides to order, and we covered it on the last one.
Was it
totally
HSG?
Hysterostereogram, something like that.
Yeah. Basically just seeing if the tubes are...
With this, they inject a dye into your uterus, into your cervix area, and they then do x-rays to see how that dye is flowing through your fallopian tubes, to make sure that they're not backed up, that they're not kinked or whatever, and all that. This is not a procedure that was done very often in Kearney. In fact,
I believe it was her first time doing it. It was on me.
Yeah. And and it was an awkward scenario just in general, because we show up and there's basically no one there, and then they get us into this room, and then it became a parade of people coming in and out of this room.
Yeah, I was gonna say your inhibitions or your worry of people seeing you kind of just go out the door, because my joke when all this was through was that it was like a circus. People just kept coming in and out of the room, and you're basically, naked from your waist down,
and in stirrups.
Yeah, and people, they're literally just walking in, okay, we gotta do this, and they're leaving, and I'm thinking, who was that person? Why did they need to walk in at this moment in time? That was the least of my problems.
Yeah.
I could only laugh about it now, because at the time, I was crying. I'm not trying to scare people. I don't know if it was because it was her first time. I don't know if it's because she showed me the needle before, and you should never show anyone a needle or anything that's gonna go inside you, especially, in that area. It just, I think it was a lot of different things, but I just remember, it was probably one of the worst things, to be honest, because I had to be awake for it. It was different when they retrieved the eggs from me. I might have woken up in pain, but I don't remember anything because I was out.
So basically, effectively, they had her laying down on an X-ray table. They had me up near her head, to help comfort her. I could hold her hands and rub her forehead a bit, but I also had to help kind of keep her still, because this was going to be uncomfortable, and when they do the X-rays, they had to be able to see it and have her still. But
we'll just say this one thing, and I do know that my doctors have always said my cervix it likes to hide, and that might have been one of the reasons why it was more difficult, which then inversely caused me more pain. So,
but
that's another thing. If yours isn't that, you don't have that problem, it might not.
But part of it is because Carney doesn't do this often, or at least at the time didn't. The room isn't set up specifically for this. It's your standard X-ray room. And the standard X-ray room, the way that they had to do this, putting her on the table, her legs were basically pointing towards the door. And then there was a little room off with a window in it where the X-ray tech would sit to run the X-ray machine. But so to do the actual procedure, of course, there's a speculum involved, because everything involving a woman's private areas needs a speculum. And they used a special acrylic one, because with the X-rays they needed it to be something that could penetrate instead of metal. And then they injected this dye, and it was I could tell instantly by the amount of pressure on my hand that it was very unpleasant. And like we said, Sarah was crying by the end of it, and I don't want to.
And I believe I have a pretty high tolerance of pain, so it was something that to be honest, I think when she said at one point, she said, we might have to just try this again, I literally was like, dear Lord, please, I don't think I can do this again. I really just didn't. And so I was just trying to find my inner peace, because I was so worried they were going to have to reschedule this, that I really honestly wouldn't wish it on anyone, because it just, I don't know what it was. The combination of everything, it just was very unpleasant.
Yeah. So moving on from that, we finally get done with that. They get images that they think are acceptable for it. And they give us kind of, we think everything looks okay, but we're going to look at it closer, after, and we'll let you know.
I remember her saying one side was you could see very easily that the dye went through. There was no problem. She said the other one took a little bit longer, but it did go all the way. Cause I just remember that much because I thought, oh, maybe that's something. But she was like, well, it's really not. It just meant it took longer, but...
But so then she said, we're going to look at it more and we'll let you know. And what proceeded was about a week waiting for results. And if there's one thing anyone going through this is very familiar with, it's waiting. Because you wait for results at every step of the way. And every time you're waiting for results, it seems like longer than the last time and worse than the last time. But we get the results back, and effectively she says, it looks fine, I don't know why you're not getting pregnant. And because I don't know, I am going to refer you to a specialist in Omaha, Dr. Delaney. And she says she's the doctor that I did my residency with. And she's really good at what she does, and she's at Methodist Women's Health here in Omaha, Nebraska. And we're going to set you up with an appointment to go see her. And we can talk all we want about these doctors and whether they, pushed us around or whether they didn't take it serious and all this. But in the end, when it comes to Dr. Delaney and this particular doctor, Dr. Torpin, I'm very thankful because this was the moment that we turned a corner and actually started really
getting answers
and really addressing infertility. So at this point, though, through all of this, we had not really figured out money. Because that's the great equalizer when it comes to infertility treatments is dollars and cents. So before we get to talking about our meeting with Dr. Delaney, we need to talk a little bit about finances. In our intro episode, we mentioned that we feel like we were actually kind of lucky in this, and finances are part of it. But it's not quite how you think. We're not rich. We don't have a lot of money. We, for the most part, live basically paycheck to paycheck. But at the time, we owned a house. And because we owned a house, and we'd lived in the house for 9 years at that point, 8.5 years.
8 something, yeah.
We had some equity in the house. So before we were able to have our meeting with Dr. Delaney, we knew we're going to have to figure out how we're going to pay for this. Because even though infertility is a health problem, and even though it affects hundreds of people a year, thousands of people a year, many insurances do not cover infertility. And some of them that do still have a lifetime maximum coverage, which usually is less than you would spend if you have to do one round of IVF. So even if you have insurance that covers infertility, you might find that you still have a very expensive out-of-pocket expense.
Well, just for example, when she referred us to Dr. Laney and I called their office, they just said, well, just so you know, the first consultation appointment is going to be $400. Mm-hmm. That was just an appointment to just see the doctor for the first time. That had nothing to do with anything else. That wouldn't include if she'd had to run other tests or something. That's just to see the doctor was $400.
Mm-hmm. And so we had to then, at that point, make the decision, we've got to figure out how we're going to afford this. And since we owned a house, we knew doing a home equity loan or a second mortgage or whatever you want to call it on the house was going to be an option for us. So we, of course, made an appointment to go down and talk to a mortgage specialist at the bank that our mortgage was through. about how to, a loan officer, I should say, about how to best leverage our house. And of course, that's a whole nother ball of wax, because they've got to run your credit, they've got to run this and that, they've got to do an appraisal on the house, they've got to figure out this, figure out that, and so it's not a quick and easy thing either. And even with all that, we also knew that that would take some time. So that's when we sat down and we said, do we just want to set up a GoFundMe? If only to get something, right? Whether we knew it probably wouldn't pay for the infertility treatments, and spoiler alert, it didn't. It gave us some money, and we are grateful for everyone who donated, because it did make the burden less. But it wasn't enough to really, I mean, it covered the first consultation, it covered gas to and from it, it covered parts of the second consultation, stuff like that.
It covered at least 2 consultations and just gas and
But
whatever getting there, but
in the end, it was kind of a drop in the bucket of the whole thing. But it was very important that we did it, and this is why. And it's why we're doing this podcast. Because the moment we pressed publish on that GoFundMe and shared it to Facebook, this weight lifted off of our shoulders, because we were no longer suffering in silence. We were no longer suffering by ourselves. It was now out there where other people knew. And we got calls pretty much immediately from family members saying, I can't believe you've been going through this all this time. Why didn't you talk about it? We didn't know. And yeah, you didn't know. We've been suffering in silence for this. That's kind of the whole thing. But now we were out there in the open with it. And that's, like I said, why we do this podcast. Because we understand how important it is to have this weight lifted from your shoulders. Whether it's putting up your own GoFundMe or putting it out there on Facebook, just saying, hey guys, could you pray for us? We're having difficulty conceiving and we want every help that we can. Or even just Facebook posts saying we've got our appointment with the fertility specialist tomorrow. It's scary, but the rewards from doing it are immense, because it takes this pressure off you and you're no longer suffering alone. You know, Sarah had coworkers who came up to her afterwards and like, we had no idea. You know, we're so sorry that you're going through this. We're sorry that you had to come to the baby shower for so-and-so. Where, you know, and so it freed us up at that point. I had friends and coworkers who came up to me and started talking to me about it. And like, we didn't know. We always wondered why you didn't have kids, but now we know. I had a coworker who very well might be listening to this podcast, who was struggling on her own with fertility and was talking about making a trip to Omaha with her husband to talk to a fertility specialist here. And we started talking more and more about this, and she started to get braver about asking questions to her doctors and potentially coming to Omaha. And in her case, in the end, she didn't end up needing it. They were able to get pregnant on their own, and have since had another. So they now have 2 beautiful babies at home. But just the fact that we were open about our fertility struggles took a weight off their shoulders, that they could talk about it a little bit, even just with us. And that's why we have this podcast, is to help take some weights off your shoulders. Because I'm relatively certain that you know someone that is struggling with infertility that you don't even know, right? I guarantee you that even if you're listening to this podcast and you've never had to deal with infertility, there's someone you know, likely someone in your own family, that's struggling with infertility. And it's important to understand that and give them support. I read a statistic this week, and we're gonna do a segment on one of these about infertility statistics. But according to this infertility site I went to, it says nearly 1 out of every 8 couples in the United States are dealing with infertility in one form or another. That puts it at about 6.7 million people each year. 6.7 million, right? And in America, 1 in 8 couples. And so you think to yourself, do you know 8 couples? I know 8 couples. I probably know 20 couples. If I know 24 couples, there's a good chance that 3 of them are struggling with infertility, right? So most of them are probably struggling alone. We're here to help. This is why we want your stories. This is why we put out this call every week for you to submit your stories of any level. Even if you're just starting with treatments, you just had your first appointment with a doctor about an actual fertility specialist doctor about this, right? Your story probably started years before that first appointment. We want to tell your story. Or maybe you've been successful. Maybe you've gone through IUI and had a beautiful baby out of it. We want to tell that story too. Or maybe you've been struggling for 10 years and your doctor can't figure out what's causing your infertility. We also want to tell your story. So that's why we created the Facebook group. It's the Facebook page is Infertility Bites on Facebook. Just search for Infertility Bites, or it's facebook.com/Infertility Bites. On that page, you will find a link to a Google form that you can fill out and give us the information that we can tell your story, and we can get the word out on your story and spread the word. If you've got some way for other people to support you, whether it's a GoFundMe or whether it's even just prayers, thoughts and prayers. The one last week wanted just thoughts and prayers. Or if you want, if you sell things on Etsy to help pay for your infertility, those are all ways that we can get the words out for you, because we truly want to help spread the word and help you out in this. But I think we will stop with our story at that point, because that's a good stopping point for now. Next episode, we'll actually get to start talking about our experiences with Dr. Delaney.
Our wonderful drives to Omaha and back.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful 3-hour drives.
For like a 20-minute appointment.
For a 20-minute appointment that were nearly weekly. But it was very much worth it. But so head on over to facebook.com/infertilitybites. Fill out that form. You can be 100% anonymous. For communication reasons, we do ask for an email on the form, but we're not gonna give that email out to anyone. It's not used for any purposes other than if we needed to get in touch with you about a question we had. If you need to, you can send us a message straight on that Infertility Bites Facebook page, or you can email us at infertilitybitespodcast@gmail.com. Get in touch with us however you want, and let us know how to tell your story. Today we have a story of someone, like I say, it's a little shorter than last week's story.
But they're all important.
It's very important. It's, as always, it's a little bit less of a gut punch.
Okay, that's good.
but it's
Kleenex used.
Yeah, but it does have still some drama to it that will come up. The person telling the story to us, who submitted it, is Jeanette Woodley. Her and her husband live in Texas, and they ended up having to go through IVF to have a baby. Her husband being her biggest supporter, as I think we'll find in lots of these stories is the case. But Jeanette Woodley's story, she'd been trying for 10 years with her husband, which is a long time.
Well, yeah.
And unsuccessful, of course, and eventually they had to go through IVF. And when they went through IVF, they were successful and had a beautiful baby girl. And then 3 days after giving birth to their rainbow baby, she had a rare, massive heart attack with pneumonia, heart failure, blood clots, and a host of other issues. She'd never heard of this pregnancy-related heart disease, and so she wanted to share her story to enlighten others and encourage them to listen to their bodies. Knowledge is power. So they've got their one baby. They're not going to be able to have another one due to this. But they are fortunate enough to have their beautiful baby. And they have some advice for people. They say every day is a new beginning. Take a deep breath and start again as many times as it takes. And I think that's a very good message there, because the journey of infertility is full of many heartbreaks and many setbacks, and many times when you wake up thinking, I don't know if we can do this anymore. Yeah. Every time you take a pregnancy test because you're 7 days late or 10 days late or 15 or 20 days late, and you finally take that pregnancy test and then it comes back negative, and you just think, I can't do this anymore. Or you go through a procedure, an IUI, and then you get your test results back and it's negative, it didn't take. And you just think, I don't know if I can take this anymore. Take a deep breath, smile, and start again as many times as it takes. Her big thing, her question that she wanted to ask is if anyone else has heard or had a SCAD heart attack, an SCAD heart attack, which is what hit her. So if anyone out there listening knows about this or has had something related, let us know.
Yeah,
We'd love to hear more stories about it.
Never heard of it.
Because it is important to know. I don't know if it's directly related to infertility or whether it's just something that randomly seems to hit her, but it's still worth talking about a bit. If you want to know a little bit more about her story, though, she does have a YouTube channel where she posted a beautiful video about her journey up to it, the birth of their baby, and then talking about the heart attack and the effects after it. I'll put the link in the show notes to this, and I'll also put it up on the Facebook page for people to find and go to it. You could also just search for Jeanette Woodley. I'm sure it would come up there. But yeah, it's a great little video to watch, and go give her a subscribe. Let her know that we're thinking of her and hoping she makes a full healthy recovery, because this really wasn't that long ago. The baby was born,
You said
February 4th of this year. So happy belated birthday.
Yeah.
And we really thought that was kind of nice and kind of serendipitous. Our own baby would have celebrated her second birthday. Well, did celebrate.
I was gonna say,
would have. That's
did I miss something?
Did celebrate her second birthday on the 9th of February, so 5 days later. So we like early February birthdays in this family, so we're very happy.
My niece's birthday's in February.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're very, very happy to report that she has a beautiful baby at home. But go watch that video. Like I said, the link will be in the show notes for this or on the Facebook page. But that'll probably do it for this episode for us here. Like I said, we've got the Facebook page, facebook.com/infertilitybites. You can also submit your stories through our email, infertilitybitespodcast@gmail.com.
Or just if you have any questions.
Or if you have any questions, you can message us on Facebook or email us straight at that. But please, I know I say this a lot, but it's so important to us to be able to tell other people's stories. Don't ever think that your story is not important or you're just starting the journey. I've said this to people over messages. Your journey started a long time ago. Your journey started that first failed pregnancy test. That's when your infertility journey started. And before any doctor took you serious on it, you probably had a year of failed pregnancy tests before they took you serious. And if you were anything like us, might have been in a situation where you couldn't go see an actual fertility specialist. Your story was starting then. We're looking for stories from all sides, not just successful, happy ones. We're going to celebrate the successful, finished stories, but every book has a beginning, a middle, and then an end, and we're wanting to tell stories on all levels of that. So, facebook.com/infertilitybites. Fill out that form there. Again, you can be anonymous if you want to, or you can choose to have your name like Jeanette did. I personally think getting your name out there is beneficial and will get some weight off your shoulders. But like I said, if you have a GoFundMe, we'll get your word out. I can't guarantee it'll get more donations, but it might, and what you got to lose there, right? So, but on that note, last week I had little Stella say bye-bye and blow some kisses, and I really just love that clip, so I'm probably going to continue to have that be the sign-off to this show for a long time. So
she gives us something else.
Yeah, she'll give us something else sometime, but for now, take it away, Stella. Say goodbye.
Bye.
I love you.
Hello.
Hello.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.